Senator from Arkansas.
Last week, Joe Biden commuted the sentences of nearly 1,500 convicted criminals, including drug dealers, fraudsters, and corrupt public officials. These are not sympathetic figures. These are individuals who stole from the poor and poisoned the sick. They tore families apart and menaced communities. They were sent to jail. They belong in jail. With this action, Joe Biden didn't just reward 1,500 criminals, he robbed hundreds of thousands of victims of the closure and justice they deserve. The cruelty of these commutations is only matched by the shameless incompetence of the administration that issued them. This administration admitted that Joe Biden didn't individually review these cases, or for that matter, anyone else individually reviewed the cases. Yet he nullified the verdict of thousands of jurors and judges anyway. He also disrespected the countless man-hours that federal law enforcement and prosecutors dedicated to solving these cases. The whole purpose of the presidential pardon power is to correct individual and limited failures of the criminal justice system. It's in the nature of the power in government itself. We are a legislature. We make generally applicable, prospective laws for everyone. Can those laws, in certain cases, yield unjust outcomes? Yes, of course. That is the nature of the legislative power. The reason an executive has the pardon power is to mitigate that injustice in specific, particular cases. It's not to make generally applicable pardons in a broad set of parameters, as White House officials have caused it. Certainly not to blindly free hundreds of duly convicted criminals. These blanket commutations demonstrate a gross contempt for our legal system and its traditions. To put President Biden's actions in context, he issued more commutations in a single day than Donald Trump, George Bush, and Bill Clinton issued in their entire presidencies. Combined. Let's just talk about a few of the beneficiaries of Joe Biden's jailbreak. Jacqueline Mills stole $3 million that was intended for hungry Arkansas kids and low-income families. Dr. Mira Sachdeva defrauded Medicare by diluting chemotherapy drugs and reusing old needles on cancer patients. At least one patient, contracted HIV as a result. Fraudster Paul Burks ran a nearly $1 billion Ponzi scheme that robbed 900,000 investors of their money. Drug dealer Wendy Hechtman and her husband manufactured and distributed super deadly carfentanil, unleashing an epidemic of drug overdoses in Omaha. Another drug dealer, Daniel Fillerup, killed a 31-year-old relapsing addict by selling her fentanyl, which is 50 times stronger than the heroin she thought she was buying. Shuquan Hemingway trafficked heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, and guns for the vicious Jalisco New Generation cartel. Joe Biden even commuted the sentence of a serial killer, Virginia Gray, who is known as the Black Widow, for murdering 2 husbands and a boyfriend and collecting insurance money. Perhaps the president would have reconsidered this decision if he knew anything about Mrs. Gray, but he didn't, because yet again, he and White House officials did not review individual cases on the merits. They didn't pick up the case file. They didn't talk to victims or families. Then there's the parade of corrupt public officials, the worst of whom is Michael Conahan, the so-called cash-for-kids judge, who accepted kickbacks in exchange for his role in sending more than 2,300 children to private detention centers, including an 8-year-old. Again, a judge in Pennsylvania sentenced more than 2,300 children to private juvenile detention centers in return for cash kickbacks. One man he sent to jail later killed himself. He was just 23 years old. His mother said that she is shocked and hurt by Joe Biden's commutation. Yet again, the president did not review the case individually. President Biden also commuted the sentence of an Ohio commissioner who took $450,000 in bribes. He even commuted the sentence of Rita Crunwell, a city comptroller from Illinois who embezzled $54 million. Crunwell was responsible for not only the biggest city embezzlement scandal in the history of Illinois, she was responsible for the biggest municipal embezzlement scandal in the history of America up to that time. Now, I understand that we have disagreements about criminal justice, and the Democrats don't always share my view on these things. But for years, we've heard lectures about the rule of law and how Joe Biden and Democrats are the defenders of democracy. Yet Joe Biden is the one commuting the sentences of the very public officials who most threaten the public trust in our democracy. The American people also know that Joe Biden issued these commutations for a simple reason. It helps cover up the corrupt pardon that he issued to his corrupt son to protect his family. I think we should condemn all of these pardons and certainly condemn the president for not individually reviewing the merits of the cases. But again, I understand my Democratic colleagues don't agree with that, so I only offer a resolution to condemn one pardon. Simply one. Maybe the worst of them all, the commutation of Michael Conahan, the Cash-for-Kids judge who took cash kickbacks and bribes to sentence more than 2,300 kids to private detention centers. The judge who put American children in jail for money. Surely the Senate can condemn this single act of corrupt clemency. Therefore, Mr. President, notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to consideration of Senate Resolution 935, which is at the desk. Further, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Senator from Arkansas.
Heard a lot of very troubling cases from the senator from Illinois. And it's true, I generally think presidents have given out improvidential pardons over times, and I'm not going to defend many of those cases of pardons. For instance, I'm not going to defend Jimmy Carter pardoning a bunch of draft dodgers indiscriminately, mostly rich and privileged kids who didn't do their duty, when poor kids from places like Yale County, Arkansas, or South Little Rock were doing their duty in Vietnam like my father was. But we're not here to talk about Vietnam draft dodgers or who President Trump pardoned or who he might pardon. There is a resolution pending on the floor that specifically condemns Michael Conahan, the Cash-for-Kids judge, who took cash kickbacks to sentence children to private juvenile detention center. Some words about this judge. I do feel strongly that President Biden got it absolutely wrong and created a lot of pain. Some children took their lives because of this. Frankly, I thought the sentence that the judge got was too light. He deserved to be behind bars, not walking as a free man. Strong words, not my words. Those are the words of Pennsylvania's Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro, who again called Joe Biden's clemency decision absolutely wrong. The senior senator from Minnesota joined Governor Shapiro and said that she too disagreed with the president's decision. She said that she, quote, did not like that one. Even the chairman of the West Virginia Democratic Party publicly condemned President Biden's commutations and specifically singled out the commutation of Judge Conahan, the Cash for Kids judge. This resolution is not partisan. It's not sweeping. It's common sense. It's about a single egregious case that happened because of egregiously bad judgment. The president and his aides set broad parameters, and apparently those parameters kicked back 1,500 cases. And they didn't even have the time and the decency to say, now let's look at these cases and see if each one of these people deserve a pardon. Maybe one was an elderly, nonviolent offender who had redeemed himself, whose victims had forgiven him. I could understand clemency in that case. Not the Cash for Kids judge. It's only 1,500 cases. They've got thousands of lawyers running around the Department of Justice. Could they not individually look at these cases? I guess not. It's just another example of how Democrats have spent 8 years of accusing Donald Trump of doing this, that, or the other dastardly thing, when in reality, they're doing much worse. We heard the senator from Illinois talking about a pardon for a political loyalist. Who could be more of a political loyalist than a president's own son? And that's what Joe Biden did. His first big post-election pardon his son. Not just for specific crimes to which he had pleaded guilty or for which he had been convicted, gun crimes and tax crimes, but for all crimes that he committed or may have committed for 11 years. That's almost twice the length of the similar pardon that President Ford gave to President Nixon, which I think, though condemned at the time, most people would now view as an act of political courage. I don't think anyone in retrospect is going to think that Joe Biden pardoning his son for every crime he might have committed against the United States for 11 years is ever going to be seen as an act of political courage, or if he does the same thing for his brother or any other members of his family before noon on January 20th. So, starting next year, I really won't have time for crocodile tears about President Trump's pardon decisions if the Senate can't bring itself today to condemn just one single egregious case of abuse of the pardon power. The Cash for Kids judge who sentenced 2,300 children to private detention centers in return for cash kickbacks. Mr. President, I yield the floor.